My stepsister wanted me to share the assets that my mom left for me, but I didn't. Her fiancé then tried to steal my mom's wedding dress, but this happened. I, 29 female, come from a family with a complicated history. My parents married young, barely out of high school, driven by a whirlwind romance that began at a local fair. They were just 19 when they tied the knot, full of dreams and naive optimism about their future together. Their families were skeptical, but they were determined to prove everyone wrong. I came along less than a year later, an unplanned surprise that threw their lives into chaos. They weren't ready for the responsibilities of parenthood, which led to a lot of tension in our household. My mom had to put her college plans on hold, while my dad struggled to find steady work to support us. Growing up, I often felt like I was more of a burden than a blessing to them. My childhood was filled with arguments and instability. I remember countless nights of my parents fighting over money, schedules, and missed opportunities. They struggled to balance their own personal growth with raising a child. My mom would often cry in frustration, feeling trapped in a life she wasn't prepared for. My dad, on the other hand, spent long hours at work, trying to make ends meet, but also, I suspect, to escape the pressures at home. I became a quiet, observant child, always trying to make myself smaller and less noticeable. I'd spend hours in my room, reading books or drawing, creating worlds where families were happy and children were wanted. My grandmother, my mom's mom, was often my safe haven. She'd take me for weekends, baking cookies and telling me stories about her own childhood. Those weekends were like breaths of fresh air in an otherwise suffocating environment. As I entered my teenage years, things came to a head. My parents' relationship had deteriorated beyond repair. The love that had once brought them together had been eroded by years of resentment and unfulfilled dreams. They decided to divorce when I was 14, a decision that felt both devastating and oddly relieving. The constant tension in our house had been unbearable, and part of me hoped that separate might mean happier. They agreed to share custody, but the transition was far from smooth. My mom moved into a small apartment across town, while my dad stayed in our family home. I felt torn between two households, never quite feeling at home in either place. My stuff was always in the wrong place, and I was constantly forgetting school books or clothes at one house or the other. My mom threw herself into work and school, finally pursuing the degree she had put on hold for so long. She seemed happier, but also more distant. Our relationship became strained as she focused on rebuilding her life. My dad, on the other hand, seemed lost. He'd never really learned how to be a full-time parent, and now he was struggling to connect with a teenage daughter he barely knew. A couple of years after the divorce, my mom met William. They crossed paths at a local coffee shop where my mom was studying for her exams. William, a divorced father himself, was immediately drawn to my mom's determination and wit. Their relationship progressed quickly, and soon they were talking about marriage. I was happy for my mom, but I couldn't help feeling a bit apprehensive about the changes this would bring to our lives. William had a stepdaughter named Susie, who was 3 years older than me. From the moment we met, it was clear that Susie didn't like me. She was standoffish and cold, barely acknowledging my presence when we were introduced. I later learned that Susie had been hoping for her mom and William to reconcile, and saw my mom and me as obstacles to that dream. I tried my best to befriend Susie, thinking it would be nice to have a sister-like figure in my life. I invited her to hang out, tried to engage her in conversations about shared interests, and even offered to help her with her college applications. But Susie consistently ignored my attempts at friendship. She'd either pretend not to hear me or give curt, dismissive responses. As my mom and William's wedding day approached, I hoped that Susie's attitude might improve. Maybe she just needed time to warm up to the idea of our families blending. I even bought her a small gift, a bracelet I thought she might like, as a peace offering. But when I gave it to her, she barely looked at it before tossing it aside with a mumbled, "Thanks." The wedding day itself was a disaster. Susie's behavior was nothing short of awful. She complained about everything. The food wasn't to her liking, the music was too loud, the decorations were tacky, and so on. She made snide comments about my mom's dress and rolled her eyes during the vows. It was clear she was determined to make her displeasure known. I tried to stay positive, focusing on how happy my mom looked. But it was hard to ignore the tension Susie was creating. At one point, I overheard her talking to a cousin, referring to my mom as the homewrecker, and me as the baggage. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Even after the wedding, my relationship with Susie remained strained. I tried to give her space, thinking maybe she just needed time to adjust to the new family dynamic. But as weeks turned into months, Susie only seemed to grow more distant and hostile towards me. She'd accidentally bump into me in hallways, exclude me from family conversations, and make subtle digs about my appearance or interests. I found myself spending more and more time at my dad's house. It wasn't ideal, his place was smaller, and he was still figuring out how to be a single parent. But at least there, I didn't have to deal with Susie's constant cold shoulder and passive-aggressive comments. My dad and I started to bond over cooking together and watching old movies. It wasn't perfect, but it felt safer than the minefield at my mom's house. My mom noticed my increased absences, and started pushing for me to spend more time at her and William's house, especially during holidays. She'd call and text, insisting that we should be together as a family. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. The thought of enduring Susie's hostility during what should be joyful family gatherings was too much for me. I tried to explain my feelings to my mom, but she seemed to brush them off. She kept saying things like, "Susie just needs time," or "You two will work it out eventually." It was frustrating to feel like my concerns weren't being taken seriously. I wanted to shake her and make her see what was really going on, but I also didn't want to add to her stress. She seemed so happy with William, and part of me felt guilty for potentially ruining that. The situation has taken a toll on my relationship with my mom. We used to be close, especially right after the divorce when it felt like it was us against the world. But now there's this constant tension between us. I feel guilty for not wanting to spend time at her house, but I also feel angry that she doesn't seem to understand how difficult it is for me to be around Susie. William, for his part, has been okay. He's polite and tries to include me in family activities, but he doesn't go out of his way to address the elephant in the room, Susie's behavior towards me. I sometimes wonder if he's afraid of confronting Susie about her attitude, or if he just doesn't see it. Either way, his passivity is frustrating. As for my dad, he's been my rock through all of this. He listens to me without judgment and provides a safe haven when things get too tense at my mom's. I'm grateful for his support, but I can't help feeling sad that my family has become so fractured. I often find myself longing for the simplicity of those weekends at my grandmother's house, wishing I could go back to a time when things were less complicated. I'm at a loss for what to do. Part of me wants to keep trying with Susie, to find some way to break through her hostility. But another part of me is tired of putting myself out there only to be rejected time and time again. I don't want to give up on having a relationship with my mom, but I also don't know how much longer I can handle this situation. Has anyone else dealt with a similar family dynamic? How did you navigate it? I feel stuck between wanting to maintain a relationship with my mom and protecting myself from constant rejection and hostility. Any advice would be appreciated. Update. It's been a few months since my last post and, unfortunately, things have taken a turn for the worse. I'm still trying to process everything that's happened, but I wanted to update you all on the situation. About 2 months ago, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. The news hit our family like a ton of bricks. It was discovered during a routine mammogram, and within days, our world was turned upside down with doctor's appointments, tests, and difficult conversations about treatment options. Despite our recent tensions, I immediately put aside my issues with Susie and focused on being there for my mom. I started spending more time at her house, helping out where I could and trying to provide emotional support. It was strange being back in that space, navigating around Susie and William, but my mom's needs took precedence over everything else. Seeing my mom go through cancer treatment has been one of the hardest things I've ever experienced. She's always been this strong, vibrant person, the woman who went back to school in her 40s and started a successful career. Watching her struggle with the side effects of chemo has been heartbreaking. Her hair started falling out, and I remember holding her as she cried, mourning the loss of something that had always been a source of pride for her. William has been by her side throughout, and I've gained a new respect for him during this difficult time. He's been attending every doctor's appointment, researching treatment options, and taking care of my mom with a tenderness that's touched me deeply. It's given me a glimpse of why my mom fell in love with him, and I've found myself feeling grateful that she has him during this ordeal. What's been shocking, however, is Susie's behavior. Even in the face of my mom's illness, she's shown little to no empathy. She rarely visits, and when she does, she seems more inconvenienced than concerned. I've tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe she's just struggling to cope with the situation. But her indifference is hard to ignore. I remember one particularly difficult day after my mom had a rough round of chemo. She was feeling nauseous and weak, barely able to keep any food down. I was in the kitchen, trying to prepare some light soup for her when Susie came home. She walked in, saw me at the stove, and without a word turned around and left. She didn't even ask how my mom was doing. It was moments like these that made me realize how deep her resentment ran. Tragically, despite everyone's hopes and the doctor's best efforts, my mom's condition deteriorated rapidly. The cancer was more aggressive than initially thought, and it had spread to other parts of her body. She passed away last week, just 3 months after her initial diagnosis. The loss has left me feeling completely adrift. My mom and I may have had our differences, but she was still my mom. The thought of never being able to talk to her again, to work through our issues, is devastating. In the midst of our grief, we learned that my mom had updated her will shortly after her diagnosis. She left all her assets, including money, jewelry, her wedding dress, and family heirlooms, to me. When William informed me of this, he seemed understanding and respectful of my mom's decision. He even handed over some of her personal items that he thought I might want to keep, including a journal she had been keeping during her treatment. Reading through that journal has been both painful and cathartic. My mom wrote about her fears, her hopes for my future, and her regrets about our strained relationship. She also wrote about how proud she was of the woman I'd become, despite the challenges of my childhood. It's given me a new perspective on our relationship and made me wish we'd had more time to heal our wounds. Susie, however, didn't take the news of the will well at all. She demanded to see it herself, insisting that there must be some mistake. When she saw that it was true, she flew into a rage. She started yelling about how unfair it was, claiming that she deserved a share of the inheritance too. She brought up all the time she'd had to put up with me and my mom, as if that entitled her to compensation. I was shocked by her reaction. Here we were, mourning the loss of my mother, and Susie was focused on material possessions. It felt like a slap in the face to my mom's memory. I couldn't help but think about how hurt my mom would have been to see Susie's true colors revealed in this way. Susie tried to appeal to William, but to his credit, he stood firm. He told her that we needed to respect my mom's wishes. This led to a huge argument between them, with Susie storming out of the house. I overheard parts of their conversation, and it was clear that this wasn't the first time they'd clashed over Susie's attitude towards me and my mom. In the days since, Susie has been sending me angry texts and leaving voicemails demanding that I do the right thing and split the inheritance with her. She's accused me of manipulating my mom during her illness and has even threatened legal action. I've been ignoring her messages, but it's adding an extra layer of stress to an already painful situation. My dad has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He's offered to let me move in with him for a while, suggesting that it might be good for me to have some distance from William and Susie as I grieve. He's also advised me to move all of my mom's assets to his house for safekeeping, given Susie's reaction. I'm seriously considering taking my dad up on his offer. The thought of staying in my mom's house surrounded by memories of her and dealing with Susie's hostility feels overwhelming right now. At the same time, I feel guilty about potentially leaving William alone in that house, especially after seeing how much he truly loved my mom. I'm trying to focus on mourning my mom and honoring her memory, but Susie's behavior is making it difficult. I don't want to fight over material things, but I also feel a strong need to protect what my mom left for me. It feels like the last connection I have to her. I'm not sure what the future holds for my relationship with William and Susie. Right now, I'm just trying to take things one day at a time. Thank you all for your support and advice on my previous post. If anyone has experience dealing with family conflicts over inheritance, I'd appreciate any insights you can offer. Update. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some recent developments in my ongoing family drama. As I mentioned in my previous post, I ended up moving in with my dad after my mom passed away. It's been a healing experience for both of us, as we've been able to support each other through our grief. Living with him has also given me a sense of security and peace that I desperately needed. We've fallen into a comfortable routine, sharing meals and often spending evenings talking about mom and reminiscing about happier times. Unfortunately, the situation with Susie has only gotten worse. A few weeks ago, I found out that she's engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Mike. Under normal circumstances, I might have been happy for her, but given our history, I just felt a sense of dread about what this might mean for me. My instincts were right. Shortly after announcing her engagement, Susie reached out to me. At first I thought maybe she wanted to make amends. But it quickly became clear that she had an ulterior motive. She asked me if she could have my mom's wedding dress for her own wedding. I was stunned by her request. This was the same woman who had shown zero empathy when my mom was sick, who had thrown a fit over the inheritance, and who had never made any effort to have a relationship with me. And now she wanted my mom's wedding dress? The dress that I remembered my mom lovingly preserving, telling me stories about her wedding day and how she hoped I might wear it someday. I politely but firmly declined, explaining that the dress held deep sentimental value for me, and that my mom had specifically left it to me in her will. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A few days later, my dad and I came home to find our house had been broken into. At first we were just shocked and scared. But as we took stock of what had happened, we realized that the only thing missing was my mom's wedding dress. The safe where we kept important documents was untouched, as were our electronics and other valuables. It was clear this was a targeted theft. We called the police, and as they were taking our statement, we heard a commotion outside. It turned out that our neighbor's security camera had caught the whole thing on video. The footage showed Mike, Susie's fiancé, breaking into our house and leaving with the dress. What happened next was like something out of a movie. As Mike was trying to make his getaway, my dad's dog, a big protective German shepherd named Max, chased him down and bit him. Max had been a source of comfort for both of us since Mom's passing, and now he was proving to be our protector too. The police arrived just in time to catch Mike, still holding the dress and nursing a pretty nasty bite on his leg. To say I was furious would be an understatement. This wasn't just about the dress anymore. They had violated our home, our sense of safety. The dress was more than just a piece of clothing. It was one of the few tangible connections I had left to my mom. The thought of Susie wearing it after everything she'd done made me feel physically ill. My dad and I decided right then and there that we were done. We pressed charges against Mike and made it clear to William that we wanted nothing more to do with Susie or her fiancé. It was a difficult decision, especially considering William had been supportive during my mom's illness, but we felt we had no other choice. To his credit, William seemed genuinely horrified by what had happened. He came to our house to apologize in person, both for Susie's behavior over the past months and for this latest incident. He told us he understood our decision to cut ties and that he respected it. As he spoke, I could see the pain and disappointment in his eyes. It was clear he was struggling to reconcile the stepdaughter he thought he knew with the person who would go to such lengths over a dress. It was a bittersweet moment. While I appreciated William's apology, it also felt like the final nail in the coffin of the blended family my mom had hoped we'd become. I couldn't help but think about how sad she would have been to see things end this way. In the aftermath of the break-in, we've taken steps to increase our security. We've changed our locks and installed a comprehensive security system. My dad even enrolled Max in additional training to reinforce his protective instincts. It's sad that we've had to go to these lengths, but it's helped us feel safer in our own home. The dress is back in my possession, safely stored away. It needed some minor repairs after the ordeal, but thankfully, it wasn't seriously damaged. I've wrapped it carefully and placed it in a secure location, along with other mementos from my mom. Sometimes I take it out just to look at it, remembering the way my mom's eyes lit up when she told me about her wedding day. Mike is facing criminal charges for the break-in. Last I heard, he and Susie were trying to paint it as a misunderstanding, claiming he was just trying to surprise her with the dress. Needless to say, the police and prosecutor aren't buying that story. As for Susie, well, I don't know what's going on with her, and honestly, I don't want to know. William has respected our wishes and hasn't tried to contact us on her behalf. Part of me is curious about how she's dealing with the fallout of her actions, but a larger part knows that distancing myself from her drama is the healthiest thing I can do. I still miss my mom every day. There are moments when the grief hits me so hard it takes my breath away. But I'm trying to honor her memory by living my life with the kindness and strength she always encouraged in me. I'm focusing on healing and moving forward, both for myself and for my dad. I'm grateful for my dad's unwavering support and for the peace we've found in our home together. We've been talking about maybe taking a trip together, something we never really got to do when I was younger. It feels like we're both getting a second chance at building the relationship we always wanted but never quite managed to achieve. Thank you all for your support throughout this difficult journey. Your advice and kind words have meant more to me than you know. While this chapter of my life has been painful and challenging, I'm hopeful for what the future might bring. I'm learning to appreciate the family I do have, and to create boundaries that protect my peace. Here's hoping that the next chapter of my life will be a bit less dramatic.